Yo, what's up? Good to see you again for the third and last Steam Next Fest of the year. That special time where devs send their demos out to sea with nothing but a canvas sack tied to a stick, a bundle of hopes and dreams, and whatever marketing budget they can afford. Every Steam Next Fest, I try to sift through as many demos as I can, find the best ones I think you all should check out. This time, I played through over 120 demos and checked out the pages for many, many more than that to find the very best of the fest. So, without further ado, let's dive on into it. As a kid, I loved everything skateboarding. All my shoes were either DC, Etnies, or Audio. Every time we went to the mall, I made my mom stop by the skate shop and let me look at all the decks. I even spent many an allowance on a P-Rod or Day One skate DVD that I'd play on repeat. So obviously, I was also a huge Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fan. And actually, I'm pretty sure Tony Hawk is a franchise I've owned the most games of. Skate Story manages to succeed where the recent release of Skate fails, in making a game that not only nails the mechanics of skateboarding, but also captures the soul and vibes of what made skateboarding culture such a defining part of the 80s through 2000s for so many of us. With dizzyingly cool acid trip-esque visuals and aesthetic, and a player controller dripping with the best game feel a skateboard game could ever claim to have, Skate Story is one of the most unique titles Devolver has published to date, which for them is saying something. If we jump forward in time from my Tony Hawk era, we find a young Vist having fallen down the rabbit hole of the legendary MMORPG World of Warcraft. I gave years of my teens to WoW, having started at the tail end of Burning Crusade and playing through Mists of Pandaria, returning for Legion, and again for the Dragonflight expansion. And as my love for WoW waned, I found it again in the arms of Final Fantasy XIV Online, and the excellent Syl in the Fading World is very much a love letter to both of these games. With art, music direction, and class mechanics picked from WoW's greatest hits, to Final Fantasy XIV's critically acclaimed boss and floor mechanics, Syl and the Fading World places you in a fun yet challenging single-player dungeon crawler to experience those highs on your own time, without the massive time commitment of a full-blown MMO. If they continue to develop and expand the satisfying class rotations, the interesting itemization that gives player agency, and boss fights that rival both Blizzard and Square Enix, they'll have a gem on their hands that the millions of subscribers to those two games will be sure to love. Okay, hear me out. I know you might see the name Bubsy and then roll your eyes, but unlike all his previous outings, this one's actually really good, not just as a meme. In a past video, I highlighted the excellent upcoming 3D platformer Demon Tides by Fabraz, and it seems that Atari has made the awesome decision to hand the development of an old IP over to a newer, scrappier developer whose hands are already deep in the space, a trend I'm happy to see developing among these legacy publishers. Once again, Fabraz shows their chops as a masterclass platformer developer. Like Demon Tides, Bubsy 4D sports the smoothest, most liberating flow state move chaining platforming that could make even Nintendo blush. With more traditional stage-based gameplay, Bubsy 4D can experiment with even wackier level design, which only manages to complement and showcase the crazy tech you can pull off with our titular cat's immaculately crafted moveset. Many of you may already know this next game, as it was featured in the wonderful Iron Pineapple's Steam Dumpster Diving series, where he plays lesser-known Souls-like and Souls-adjacent games. But I just had to shine a spotlight on one of my most anticipated titles, Sword Hero, which has a demo out for a very small, combat-oriented vertical slice of the game. But even just that has me excited enough to warrant its appearance here. Sword Hero's demo showcases its excellent Souls-like combat that includes limb targeting and dismembering, physics-based and environmental damage, and wide approach to combat with varied weapons and spells along with directional attacks. The full release promises even more systems in this living, open-world RPG like housing, prosthetics, crime, factions, NPC schedules, and more. And if the attention to its combat systems is any indication, it follows that these other systems could be just as well crafted. No game has impacted me more emotionally than the incredibly novel, BAFTA award-winning Before Your Eyes, which had me full-body weeping by the end of it, snot bubbles and all. And its follow-up, Goodnight Universe, is already looking to be another home run hit. The team at Nice Dream Games again leans on the same unique mechanics of using your webcam and your eyes to control gameplay that they developed in their time at previous studio Goodbye Games, this time to seemingly even greater success. Through the use of clever game, sound, and visual design, they managed to achieve a level of tactility with their blinking mechanics despite the player not even putting their hands on any sort of input device. A charming story about an incredibly relatable family and their telekinetic baby promises to get wacky and weird while maintaining the heartfelt tone that the writers executed perfectly in their last title. Radical Fish Games' first title, Crosscode, is often hailed by its players as an underrated action RPG gem, with classic retro-inspired 16-bit pixel art, smooth but robust action combat, and satisfying puzzles. And while Crosscode is certainly a good, maybe even great game, its spiritual successor, Alabaster Dawn, seems so far to take all of the aspects that Radical Fish Games already solidly built in their first game, cranks the knob to 11 on every single one. The gorgeous pixel art is accentuated by crazy smooth animation tech and is showcased with a level of aesthetic cohesion and polish behind it that speaks to a matured and more confident art team. Understated yet perfectly fitting music that reminds me of a blend of Falcom's Sound Team JDK, the team behind the Trails in the Sky games, and Hitoshi Sakamoto, the brilliant mind behind the music of Final Fantasy's Ivalice setting. The combat and puzzle gameplay are frictionless, but not in a way that would render it simple or shallow, as there is plenty of depth in both aspects that is requisite in a meaty JRPG-styled game such as this. There's no weird or crazy gimmick to this one, just an insanely well-made follow-up, begging you to sink your teeth into it. I just recently finished my first ever playthrough of The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, and to be honest, I finally understand all the old heads that seem to appear out of nowhere and chime in whenever any conversation about Bethesda games crops up, saying how Morrowind is their best game, because it's kinda true. Morrowind's world and exploration feel so much more free than anything else, even by today's standards. It's like a giant RPG sandbox for you to take on as anyone and in any way you want. And Ardenfall wears its Morrowind influence proudly on its sleeve. In the first major quest the demo pits you against, I found more than a handful of ways to resolve the situation, with more possible situations probably hidden away or dependent on me playing a different race or type of character, eliciting different responses from NPCs. It's this kind of deep character roleplay, mixed with solid dungeon crawling gameplay and combat, in a world that's meant for you to travel off the beaten path and explore in, that even experienced studios like Obsidian have been trying to replicate for years to middling success. And Ardenfall looks to have the potential to maybe have the recipe for that sauce. One recurring thought I've had while digging through Next Fest demos is that if you're gonna put out a game in a genre that is not only completely oversaturated, but also already has some absolutely titanic titles in it, some of which are very fresh on the mind, looking at you, Hades likes, you better stand out by doing something very unique like the recently released Ball X Pit, a game I highlighted in a previous Best of the Fest, or by doing the core idea very, very well. And in the case of Hellmaiden, it's the latter, managing to stand out in the tremendously crowded pool of survivor likes despite sticking to a lot of the core mechanics without a weird subversion or gimmick, just due to its insane level of polish and eye-catching art direction that invokes 90s anime classics like Tenchi Muyo or Cardcaptor Sakura. Add to that mix a head-bangingly good soundtrack, a neat card-based system for the typical Survivors upgrades that adds a bit more player agency to an easily mind-numbing genre, and bosses that turn the tables on you with wild bullet hell-styled attacks a la Picayune Dreams, and you have a title that can hopefully dredge its way through the slop to shine as one of the heavy hitters of this genre. Homura Hime is like asking your mom for Nier Automata, but then she tells you that you have Nier Automata at home, and then you kind of get disappointed at that. But then you get home and remember your mom, oh yeah, your mom was on Iron Chef,
Her home cooking is probably better than most other fast food or grocery store brands of food anyway, and like, how could you forget that? Don't you remember the time that you guys had to literally get passports and fly to Japan for 3 weeks, and because of that, you missed those exams and had to take summer school that same year that your friends wanted to rent a condo at the beach, so you couldn't go with them, and then they went without you, all because mom wanted to go on that show. But hey, I guess at least you got to see Tokyo and Mount Fuji, so that was cool, and I guess maybe if you weighed the options, it was kind of a better trade-off anyway.
Wait, I think the metaphor kind of got away from me. Anyway, Homura Hime, while clearly a lower budget title than Nier Automata, mimics a lot of its action, gameplay, and combat along with its signature bullet hell-esque boss battles very well, while adding a few touches of its own to make the combat their own. While not the most polished or high-fidelity game on this list by a long shot, its combat was fun enough to make me giddy with delight over and over again, and if the bosses and enemies continue to be this fun throughout the entire game, I would be happy to give this scrappy little title my time and money. I've never played Tarsier Studios' Little Nightmares 1 or 2, but they've definitely made it onto my backlog after trying the demo for what is effectively their follow-up to those titles, REANIMAL. Right off the heels of the contentious release of Little Nightmares 3, after the IP moved hands from Tarsier to Supermassive Games, it's refreshing to see that to both newcomers and old fans of the franchise, Tarsier Studios seems to have nailed what led to the critical successes of their original 2 titles with this demo. Great game feel, clever little puzzles, and amazing atmosphere with requisitely creepy baddies made my short time with REANIMAL a frightful delight, reminding me in many ways of one of my favorite indie juggernauts, Playdead's Inside. And the addition of optional co-op makes the idea even more enticing, because the only thing better than doing spooky alone is doing spooky with a friend. Rubinite is a snappy, pixel art, Souls-esque boss rush game that surprised me with its creative mechanics that managed to pull off some really cool ludonarrative harmony between its exposition and gameplay. In Rubinite, you play as Ruby, the last in the line of a special group of people whose eyes allow them to see the cursed blood crystals resting inside the bodies of powerful creatures and people that make them effectively immortal against the average warrior. This manifests as a gameplay mechanic in combat by requiring you to destroy their crystal before being able to defeat them, which you do by standing still and focusing on the enemy while in the middle of combat, which closes your field of vision into a small area around them as you charge up a bar to mark them. The developers Cupdog Games then play with this mechanic in a variety of delightful ways, adding a level of push your luck, allowing you to stack up these marks on the enemy that can then be detonated for damage, but completely lost upon taking damage. Or risk and reward systems like the ability to perfect dodge to instantly stack these marks up, and the distance you stand away from the boss while focusing, affecting the speed at which your marks stack, and even boss mechanics that play with attacks that originate from the dark areas outside of your field of vision. These novel and creative mechanics add to the already solid core of good Souls design, like well-telegraphed boss movesets and animations, and a trinket system that allows you to tailor your character to your playstyle. If you're a fan of Souls-likes or Souls-adjacent games like fellow boss rush title Fury, you are sure to appreciate this compact gem of a game. Like the aforementioned Fury, Cairn is the third full game developed by the wonderful Game Bakers, a studio who's yet to have a single miss with me. Unlike their more action-packed Fury or story-heavy Haven, Cairn is a game about being a lone mountain climber on her attempt to ascend the legendary mountain Kami, a towering colossus of a peak meant to evoke the same feelings as the real-life K2 or Mount Everest. Unlike the more atmospheric and chill mountain climbing game Jusant, Cairn leans heavily into the minutia and realism of rock climbing, with mechanics governing grip, limb stamina, hunger, thirst, and injury. All these pieces of design come together in a masterful way to create gameplay that is tense and stressful, but also rewarding and satisfying. There are no set handholds in Cairn. You must use your eyes and wit to determine where best to place your extremities to gain purchase on the rocky slopes you're meant to conquer. And just like real rock climbing, the effort is just as much puzzle solving as it is athleticism. With the climbs being designed in such a manner that you can craft your route up the jagged stone in any way you please, this game will make for such a personal, hard-won, and rewarding experience. With the previous game being yet another game about climbing, Some of you keen-eyed viewers, and probably even those of you that aren't so keen-eyed, have surely noticed by now that I have a large weakness to a few particular things when it comes to video games. Like funny little guy games, 3D platformers, Souls-like combat, weird crap that most people probably might barely consider a game, and sailing. The Last Caretaker is a survival exploration game that takes place on a world submerged in unending ocean, as you play the last of the robotic caretakers of this world, awoken from a long hibernation to find yourself the final hope for humanity. Through classic survival gameplay with some seemingly sci-fi automation game-inspired elements, a la Satisfactory or The Altars, you try and restore and build up the Lazarus Complex to bring humanity back from the brink by embarking across the seas on your very own ship to other locales and facilities to scavenge for materials and technologies, all while trying to unravel the mysteries of what happened to humanity and this planet. There was a period in my early teens where most of my gaming was done on a little 13-inch hand-me-down MacBook. And at that primordial time of Mac gaming, before the days of the App Store, there were few options for us Mac users in terms of game selection. I had played the absolute wheels off of Halo for Mac along with Cube 2 Sarbraten, and spent a lot of my time just walking around the multiplayer maps by myself, which, when alone, makes for such a strangely solemn experience. One that's been replicated intentionally in titles like Bubsy, almost like being somewhere you weren't supposed to be, a sort of digital backroom, simultaneously in and out of bounds, where both nothing and anything could happen. No Players Online builds on this idea of the liminally empty multiplayer map, with you playing the part of someone who inherits an ancient PC and discovers the beta files for an unreleased shooter game tucked away in some forbidden corner of the early internet, only to discover something sinister and haunted among the bits and bytes. OPUS Prism Peak is an introspective narrative game that centers its gameplay and story around the mechanic of taking pictures, capturing moments in time to try and immortalize and hold on to them, when in reality, things can be far more transient. In the small slice offered in the demo, OPUS Prism Peak feels like playing through a Hayao Miyazaki film, or like noted by one of the official quotes, a Makoto Shinkai movie like Your Name. The developers nailed the hard-to-capture essence of those works, the bright and sunny tone often underlined by a quiet solemnity brewed from the very human struggles that we all face and relate to. It's hard to recommend narrative games based on demos, as you never know where the story will go and how well the team handles the rest of the game, but along with its fantastic anime-inspired art direction, OPUS Prism Peak seems to set a strong precedent and case for its vision in the short runtime of the demo. No game in all of these Next Fest has made me bust out laughing as hard as the profoundly witty and very funny Ledgerbound. In this cross between visual novel, dating sim, and tactics RPG, you play as Reyna, an insurance adjuster in a fantasy world who spends her days denying claims by replaying her clients' last battles, and proving that the fault lies with their inability to claim victory from the jaws of defeat, until the day she has to step out on the battlefield herself in order to stop a world-ending plot that would bankrupt her firm. Ledgerbound's tactics gameplay is straightforward yet fun, with neat battlefield mechanics and synergies between units that keep the gameplay fresh and interesting, but the real sauce of this game is its writing and performances. The go-getting elf Reyna, the snarky dragon Jazz, the quizzical Hobnob, and the uppity Prince Avarice form a melting pot of hilarious interactions with dialogue dripping with wit and charm. And every conversation from this mismatched crew of so-called heroes had me laughing my butt off. You know what? Actually, hold up. Let me just show you from when I was streaming. Where's the tape? Ah, here it is.
You find Jazz filling out forms, presumably Heroes Guild registration paperwork, on her clipboard. She glances up at you.
Nope.
I didn't even say anything.
Because I know what you're gonna say. Oh, Jazz, I'm so scared. I don't want to be a hero. Please let me go home and make sweet awkward love to my books.
I don't make awkward...
See, that crap's hilarious, and it's just a snippet of the excellent comedic stylings of this game that I know will be an absolute hit. Our second dungeon-crawling, first-person RPG in the list, This time with very different experiential goals, Verho Curse of Faces is another game in the subgenre of first-person RPGs that take inspiration from Software's classic King's Field and Shadow Tower games that seems to be picking up steam in the last few years, with titles like Lunacid and Fly Knight reaching near universal critical acclaim. These games, while sometimes borrowing from other genres like Souls-likes and ARPGs, all feature methodical combat and dungeon exploration chocked full of secrets and mysteries. Verho is no exception. Even with the small showing of the demo, Verho Curse of Faces shows off some of the unique and fantastical treasures you'll be able to obtain in the main game, like an orb that shows secret passageways, or a certain moonlit greatsword that fires blasts of magical energy. If you like old-fashioned dungeon delving to find valuable treasure, solving ancient mysteries to obtain powerful artifacts, and proving your mettle against weird and grotesque monsters, this looks like an RPG worth trying out. Okay, you're either going to agree with me that this next game is brilliant, or I'm just going to completely lose you and you're all going to call me a tasteless hack in the comments. Either way, Queue Up is a game about playing competitive online games, where instead of having to worry about skill-based matchups, balance patches, having a higher DPI mouse, having the newest meta memorized, or even just being good, your matches hinge on a literal coin flip. It's part clicker/incremental game with upgrades and resource optimization, part multiplayer ladder climb with ranks and hero characters, and part meta commentary on the state of competitive gaming and the over-commercialization of esports. While mechanically the gameplay requires almost no actual input from the players, the trappings and design of the game so confidently give off the air of a real esport that it somehow starts to trick your brain into that place of living and breathing your favorite multiplayer matchmaker. I know I've talked quite a bit about my gaming childhood throughout this video, but if you'd permit me, I'd like to top this list off with a little story from my childhood. I was raised by a single mother, which often meant that if she needed to work and I wasn't at school, she would have to find a babysitter to take care of me. And one of those people was a married woman who my mom was friends with through their mutual commiseration of being two primarily Japanese-speaking people in a place where English was the lingua franca. I didn't know these people very well, as I'd only ever met the woman, who didn't speak much English, but I distinctly remember that this one day, right around the turn of the millennium, when I went to their house to be babysat, and unusually, due to him being a firefighter, the woman's husband was off duty that day, and upon arriving, asked if I liked video games, to which I obviously replied yes. He took me to his computer and booted up one of the first real PC games I ever saw, Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I remember being completely in awe as he showed me how you moved your company of heroes around the map with their soldiers and wizards in tow, exploring wild lands and capturing enemy castles. It was a far cry from the straightforward jumping and running of the video games that I had experienced up until then. The hours flew by in an instant as he taught me the systems and controls of the game and walked me through my first few campaigns. And before I knew it, my mom had returned to pick me up. As is normal for a child enthralled by a new shiny, I very begrudgingly relinquished the controls and started to pack up my things to leave while my mom chatted with her friend. But just as I finished and we headed out the door, the husband stopped us, and he handed me a jewel case with a CD in it, a Sharpied label quickly scribbled on it stating Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I remember beaming at him as I held my very own copy I could install on my mother's Sony Vaio PC at home. This was the moment that started my love for PC gaming and what led to my eventual foray into Warcraft 3 and beyond. The Heroes of Might and Magic franchise has changed throughout the years, and I had parted ways with it, seeing it appear in Steam sales alongside mixed to negative reviews, and wistfully remembering the game that sparked my love for this industry. But upon seeing the trailer for Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era, that childlike wonder I felt at the original roared up once more. Now, having tried the game, I can say that Unfrozen has truly captured the magical essence of what made the original so compelling to me all those years ago. From the visuals to the music to the classic gameplay, every single facet of this game seems to pay homage to Heroes 3. It's the platonic ideal of the type of media that looks exactly how you remember it looking in your mind's eye through rose-colored lenses. Now that I have a son of my own, 4 years old, I cannot wait to be able to sit with him in my lap and show him this wonderful world of adventure too. Oh wow, the end of the video, huh? Thanks again for making it all the way here then. I really honestly appreciate it. I hope you found something in this video that sparks the same sense of excitement and hype that I get every time I play a good demo. And if you yourself played through some demos this next fest and found some cool ones, or even if you had a differing opinion than I did on some of the demos on this list, just drop your opinions down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, just because I didn't include it in the list doesn't mean that there aren't many other great titles to choose from, including the ones shown at the beginning and end of the video, which you should check out too. They might have just barely not made it onto the list, or maybe I just didn't see enough of it to be able to make a good judgment. Anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace out.